The NFL preseason is officially here, which means it's mock draft season again. Super excited for this college football season and, of course, the pro season as well. And we're going to do a mock draft with only 31 picks because the Dolphins had one of their picks taken away with the tampering and Stephen Ross. It's a whole disaster. And this mock draft ended up being really interesting. I wanted to mix it up a little bit, get some names in there that maybe you guys hadn't seen that I think could end up being first-round picks. So there are some good players that have fallen out. Not everyone can be a first-round pick, but that's why it's so fun to do these at the start of the college football season, because you can kind of take where expectations are and then see how those develop or end up changing a ton throughout the season. So some of these players we're betting on upside, as you'll see with the next slide. But starting off here, this is based off of Super Bowl odds when I did this yesterday. So it could change when you're watching this video. But on the 12th of August, these were the Super Bowl odds from Bet Online or whatever that website is. And we had the Texans at number 1. Had them going quarterback CJ Stroud. And previously, I had Will Anderson Jr. at this spot, who I think is the best player in college football. But I think what this comes down to, even though I like Davis Mills, if the Texans end up in the number 1 spot, they're probably going to end up just saying, all right, Davis Mills isn't our guy. If they're the worst team in football, and it takes more than a quarterback to win, obviously, but if they're the worst team in football, I think they might just cut their losses and end up taking what they believe to be a franchise QB at that time. Who knows if Lovie Smith will be in the picture. I still think there's a big chance that the Texans don't end up taking a quarterback in the 2023 NFL draft. But if they have the number 1 overall pick, it might be tough not to. And that leaves the Falcons going Will Anderson Jr. at 2. I think he's a beast. And they just drafted Desmond Ridder. Whether he's their QB of the future or not remains to be seen, but the potential is there, and it gives them an extra year to work with. So have the Falcons going with a non-quarterback at number 2, and in my opinion, the best college football player currently, Will Anderson Jr. from Alabama. And then at number 3, I have Peter Skoronski out of Northwestern going to the Bears. The Bears' offensive line is really quite poor. Skoronski could end up playing guard as well, but I think if you're drafting him at this spot, you probably envision him to be your starting left tackle of the future in Chicago. Justin Fields needs protection, and in my opinion, right now, regardless of potential for the 2023 season, I think Skoronski is the best offensive lineman in this class. That being said, there are some guys that could really move up quite a bit. Anton Harrison from Oklahoma, Paris Johnson from Ohio State. There's a ton of potential, but Skoronski to me right now is the best offensive lineman in the class, and it's not a tremendous offensive line class, by the way. And then at number 4, I have the Panthers going with Bryce Young. Now, it could end up being a great offensive line class, but this is just where we are preseason expectations. But Bryce Young, Heisman last year. Obviously, there's a whole lot more to being a good draft prospect and drafted highly than winning the Heisman. We've seen so many guys win the Heisman and then not even be a top 10 pick, even in recent memory. Devontae Smith at wide receiver was not a top 10 pick, won the Heisman. Lamar Jackson was the last pick of the first round, obviously won the Heisman. So don't tell me, oh, how do you have CJ Stroud ahead of Bryce Young when Bryce Young was the Heisman winner? And he shouldn't have been. It should have been Will Anderson Jr., also from Bama. Bryce Young's awesome. I just think that NFL scouts and teams are going to prefer the size of CJ Stroud and the offense that we've seen at Ohio State a little bit more to what Bryce Young's been doing at Alabama. Great offense, great talent around him, obviously, in both situations, but we're going with the pro-style size. And CJ Stroud's a very good prospect as well. But the Panthers, I mean, they traded for Baker, but it's a 1-year rental. If Baker plays well, yeah, maybe he ends up coming back, maybe he ends up going somewhere else. But we'll have to see. I'm not convinced Baker Mayfield is the answer for the Panthers, even though I think there's still a ton of potential with Baker. We'll have to see how it works out in Carolina in 2023. That's why this is going to be a ton of fun to look back on. At number 5, I have the New York Giants taking Will Levis. I think it's pretty clear that Daniel Jones is not the answer, at least how it looks right now for the Giants. And there's probably no quarterback other than maybe Anthony Richardson with more hype and more potential based not off of what we've seen so far, but what we expect to see in the future. Levis is like 23, 24, going to be years old in the draft. So a little bit of an older quarterback, but he's a big dude with a big arm. And obviously that has a lot of people buzzing about his potential. And he hasn't really shown a ton at Kentucky so far. It's been flashes. And obviously with the potential here, we're hoping that we can see him put it together in the SEC in 2023 at Kentucky. So it's going to be a tough conference. It's going to be tough to get great play out of a quarterback in the SEC. Obviously, saw it with Bryce Young. But at Kentucky, Will Levis is obviously going to struggle a bit more to put up these unbelievable numbers. However, the potential is certainly there from a size to athletic standpoint. Jalen Carter at number 6, one of the best players in the draft in my opinion, is an interior defensive lineman. The Jags go in a number of different spots. I'm not convinced this is a receiver, but I think it could be. And Jalen Carter ends up going to the Jags at number 6. Number 7, I have Anthony Richardson, another height, weight, speed freak at quarterback, like we've seen with some of these recent guys like Malik Willis. Anthony Richardson is the biggest and maybe the most athletic quarterback combo we've seen in recent memory. He's got a big arm. Dan Mullen just didn't use him for whatever reason. Just kept rocking with Emory Jones in Florida. It was kind of a disaster, kind of a nightmare. He has, of course, been fired. Anthony Richardson probably will be the starting quarterback, barring anything crazy going on into 2022. So AR-15, Anthony Richardson is sick. Just potential out the wazoo. We'll just have to see it come together in 2022. But there's no doubt he could end up being a top 10 pick. And with Jared Goofball probably not being the answer, Goff in Detroit, Anthony Richardson, this could be the year that the Lions take a QB. And then number 8, we have another QB. This is the thing. There are some good QB prospects as it stands right now. Obviously, things will change. Not all of these guys are likely to be drafted inside the first round, especially not inside the top 10. But this is why a preseason or way too early mock draft changes a lot from where we're going to be, come January or February when we're doing these mock drafts. But for Seattle, I don't really believe in Drew Lock or Geno Smith, of course. And Tyler Van Dyke was really good at Miami last season, and I'm really excited to see what he can do in 2022 with that Hurricane offense, with Mario Cristobal coming in. It's going to be interesting. We'll have to see, but Van Dyke has a ton of potential. And certainly could be a top 10 pick. One of those big potential offensive linemen I talked about earlier was Paris Johnson from Ohio State. Have him going to the Commanders at number 9. It's interesting because I think there's a little bit of a misconception that the Washington Commanders offensive line was unbelievable last year and only got better when they lost Brandon Sheriff. And the PFF grades for offensive line play are not how actual NFL coaches evaluate offensive line play. There's a very different mix up there. That's, I would say, that is the biggest differentiator for all of the PFF grades in how offensive line play is evaluated. PFF just does it kind of backwards, in my opinion, and in the opinion of a lot of guys that I trust. So I don't believe, especially not from watching them and the guys that I've talked to, they don't believe that the Washington Commanders offensive line was anywhere close to elite last year, even though PFF had them in a good spot. Paris Johnson Jr., I think long-term is an upgrade on Charles Leno at left tackle, and that's kind of the idea here for the Commanders. At number 10, I have the Jets going Trenton Simpson. I think this is a really good fit for the Robert Saleh defense with the Jets. We've seen super versatile athletic players in that defense before when he was out in San Francisco, and they just really haven't had that chess piece of a player for the Jets so far. Simpson is a true linebacker, and I know they have like Hampson to Cyril Dean, like trying to play linebacker. It's just not a great fit to bring safeties down all the time, but Trenton Simpson gives you linebacker size and strength with like safety, speed, and athleticism overall. I think it's a really, really good fit for the defense. He is a monster. Think kind of like in the same way that Isaiah Simmons for Clemson moved all over, did a bunch of different things. That is Trenton Simpson, but whereas Isaiah Simmons was more of a safety, Trenton Simpson is more of a linebacker, if that makes sense to you. For number 11, have the Steelers going Keely Ringo. They could do a bunch of different things, but that secondary is far from elite. The cornerback group is fine, but I think Keely Ringo is a long-term upgrade. Really good player for the Georgia Bulldog defense. And then at number 12, have the Eagles going Myles Murphy, their first of 2 first-round picks in this class. Really, really good defensive lineman. I've decided to list him at D-line instead of edge. He's a big dude, I think 6'5", 275. Has potential to play 3-4 defensive end or just base 4-3 defensive end. I think you can play anywhere on the defensive line, really. You're just probably not going to play him over the nose. But you'd have Jordan Davis in this scenario. Myles Murphy could honestly slide inside, be a 3-tech, 3-5, and then maybe even outside as a true edge. But, I know you have Milton Williams. Fletcher Cox is not going to be there forever. Brandon Graham's getting old. They could go with a more true edge, but Myles Murphy, I think, would be able to do a really, really good job in that defense, especially because the Eagles have a bunch of different versatile looks. I think Myles Murphy would be a tremendous, tremendous fit. I think they do a lot of 2-4-5, right? I think I heard they were installing that. So we'll have to see what the Eagles look like in 2022, but Myles Murphy, either way, I think would be a very good fit. You keep hearing me use this term potential, but at this time, it really is what you have to go off of, and Tony Grimes has a ton of potential. Big dude, really good athleticism as far as I can tell. The ball production was not elite by any means, but that's obviously something that you'll look for in 2022 and see what changes there. But ball production, in my opinion, is not always a great indicator of cornerback success. You look at a guy like Xavier Rhodes at Florida State, who had very, very limited ball production, however, was a very, very good NFL corner for a number of years. And then you look at a guy like, obviously, Trayvon Diggs is going to stick out in everyone's mind. There is a huge value to interceptions and stuff, but there's also a really big value to a guy like A.J. Terrell last season for the Falcons, who was just locked down. And Tony Grimes right now looks more like a lockdown guy than a big ball hawk, but we'll have to see what 2022 has in store. Patriots could really use an upgrade at corner, especially a big athletic guy. They really love that style of CB on the boundary, so Tony Grimes to me felt like a really good fit. Number 14 have the Texans going receiver Kayshon Boutte out of LSU. And Boutte is a really, really good player. Dynamic, electric after the catch. He has like a second, third, fourth, fifth gear sometimes. However many gears you can have, Kayshon Boutte has got it with the ball in his hands. Really, really good player. I think there is a pretty good chance he's the first receiver off the board. And we'll go to the Cardinals at 15 with Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think the player is really, really solid, really good. But we've seen guys without like top-tier elite athleticism, without kind of that extra gear, and that's kind of Jackson Smith and Jigba. He's got great hands. I think he's a really fluid player, and he's pretty good after the catch as well at times. I like the player a lot, but we've seen a guy like Justin Jefferson, fall outside the top 20, and Jackson Smith and Jigba at number 15 doesn't really seem too crazy to me. I know there's a lot of mock drafts that have him like inside the top 5, inside the top 10. I think it's more likely he's drafted in the teens if I had to bet on it, but the player is really, really good. And then at 16, I have the Titans going Nolan Smith out of Georgia. Now, he was a former 5-star recruit that really started coming on strong last season, but obviously there was a ton of talent around him. But now he'll have a real opportunity to shine. I don't know what the deal is with Adam Anderson on the other side. I really have no idea what's going on there, so I won't speak on it. But the Georgia defense has lost a ton of talent. There's obviously no Jordan Davis anymore, even though they probably have the best defensive lineman still kept on that team on the interior in Jalen Carter, who we talked about earlier. But they obviously lost Trayvon Walker as well, Nakobe Dean. They lost Channing Tindall. They lost Quay Walker. They lost a lot of talent on the back end as well. But my point is, it's going to be tough without a lot of that strength on the defensive line. Losing Jordan Davis, losing Devontae Wyatt, losing Trayvon Walker. Nolan Smith is going to have his toughest season. If he rises to the occasion, number 16, I think, is a more than fair spot for somebody of his talent. And the Eagles have 2 first-round picks in this year's draft as it stands right now. And I think that's the point where you could stand to take a running back, like a less valuable position. And I'm a big Texas Longhorns fan, as you guys know. Hook 'em horns. I think Bijan is incredible. Probably the best running back prospect we've seen since Saquon Barkley in 2018. Bijan is a stud. He is incredible. He can catch the ball really well out of the backfield as well. He's got a ton of value to an offense. And for a team like the Eagles, who don't really have a bona fide stud at running back right now, I do like Miles Sanders and Kenneth Gainwell, but Bijan is just a different level of player. I think you can afford to take, a running back with your second first-round pick at the back end of the teens. I don't think it's too crazy, especially for someone of his talent. I could even see him going higher in the draft as well. Number 18, have the Vikings going Brian Brzee. Brzee's really, really good, really athletic. Did have a big injury, but still has a ton of potential. And for the Vikings, I was really looking all over at their team, and they could go a number of different directions as well. Like, I could see receiver even. I like their receivers, but you factor Adam Thielen getting a bit older as well. I could see them going corner. I don't think they would go safety again. I could see them going edge, especially with Danielle Hunter's situation, and you need more talent on the other side anyway. I know Zadarius Smith, but also a little bit older. But in the end, I settled on just a 3-4 versatile type guy where you think, okay, this guy can play 3-tech, this guy can play 5-tech, this guy can potentially even rush over the center as well. So Brzee is a stud. I know you don't have a 3-4 defense in Minnesota. It's a 4-3 right now. But Brzee has potential to move across the line is kind of more of my point. And when I say he's a 3-4 versatile defensive lineman, he's not dead set on the Vikings here. It's for a number of different teams as well that would be considering a player like this. He's a stud. I think he's a good fit for the Vikings defense as well. Play him at 3-tech, can play him at 5-tech, 4-eye, wherever you want to do across that space on the defensive line. I think he's got enough speed to be a really, really good player from that 4-eye spot or that 3-tech spot, where he's going to be a really tough matchup for a guard because he's so big but so fast as well. Josh Downs, 19 out of UNC. Downs is, I would say, he's not T.Y. Hilton, obviously, but I think he would play a similar role to what we've seen T.Y. Hilton play in the past. He's got great speed, really good player, can win over the top. I think he's a good fit for the Colts offense that has a receiver that really doesn't fit a lot of that mold in Michael Pittman Jr., who I think is a really good receiver, but is just a very different player than Josh Downs, and I think it would be good to add him to the offense. And then number 20, have the Raiders going offensive tackle Anton Harrison out of Oklahoma. Plain and simple, the Raiders' offensive line is really, really, really bad. Bunch of stuff going on here. Bunch of stuff. This is a really fun grouping of picks. At number 21, have the Cowboys going Andre Carter, a huge athletic edge rusher out of Army. So I know what you're probably thinking, or maybe you're not, but Army, doesn't he have to go and serve in the military? Why would he be a first-round pick? Well, this is the best draft prospect we've seen coming out of a military school in quite some time. And there are ways around your military service. You can push it off. So after his NFL career, say, he could go and serve his time in the military. So there are a bunch of different ways to get around just going straight into the service as soon as you finish college. But Andre Carter could absolutely be a top pick in the draft next year. And again, he's not dead set, absolutely has to go into the military. There are ways around it and deferred service, things like that. At number 22, have the Dolphins taking Noah Sewell. Of course, this is their pick from the San Francisco 49ers, as the other pick, their actual pick, was taken from them. Noah Sewell would be a big upgrade to their linebacking core. Sewell is a very solid player. And there's another Oregon linebacker here I don't have going in the first round, Justin Flo. Got to see him stay healthy, but they probably have the best linebacker duo in the country. If he stays healthy, Noah Sewell, Justin Flo, great combo for the Oregon Duck defense. At number 23, have probably the most interesting player in this entire draft right now, in Tyree Wilson out of Texas Tech, former Texas A&M guy, ended up transferring. And in the same way that Trayvon Walker ended up being the number 1 overall pick this past year, Tyree Wilson has a lot of the same things that you'd look for in terms of unbelievable length, which was obviously pretty highly coveted by NFL teams. And he had decent production last year, like 7.5 sacks in the Big 12. Not anything crazy, but sacks obviously are not always a great indicator of pass rush talent. They can be a little bit misleading. But when you have someone that's a pretty good athlete with incredible length, Tyree Wilson could end up being a first-round pick, and it honestly feels like the exact perfect team would be Seattle. He's also like 275 pounds, could play across the defensive line in a number of different spots, where he's going to be interesting. We'll have to see what happens. Could end up not being a first-round pick at all. Could end up being a top 10 pick. We'll have to see what happens with Tyree Wilson. And then at number 24, have the Bengals going Felix Anyudike-Uzama out of Kansas State. He's really, really good, explosive, can be really, really strong at times, great play strength at times. I really like the player. Got to see him up close and personal at Kansas State. And you think, oh, this guy must be a superstar out of Manhattan. But imagine Manhattan, by the way. You have Manhattan, right? Everyone kind of associates Manhattan with New York. There's a sick college football player out of Manhattan. You go, maybe you're not familiar with college football. You think, in New York City, I could see them having a really good college team. No, it's Kansas. It's Manhattan, Kansas. I don't know. I'm not going to rant about it, but, it's just funny to me. Like Paris, Tennessee. What are we doing? Anyway, back to football. I have the Ravens taking Jordan Addison at number 25, another really solid receiver prospect. They lost Hollywood Brown. Could end up seeing them take a receiver, I think, and he did end up transferring to USC, as I predicted correctly in my way too early mock draft from months ago. Number 26 of the Lions going Antonio Johnson. I wanted to pencil a linebacker in here, but I could also see them upgrading the secondary. You have Antonio Johnson that could definitely play in the box, strong safety, nickel corner, kind of move him all over. Really good athlete, really good player. Could see him being a first-round pick. And there are a bunch of players like him in this class we'll talk about. So he gets number 27. Got the Packers taking Quentin Johnston. Quentin Johnston is a beast, real big-bodied receiver, and we've seen the Packers value that in the past. Just, it's the thing of, will Goody ever draft a first-round receiver? Probably not, but I'm going to pencil it in for right now. And then I have the Chargers going Siaki Ika out of Baylor. Big nose tackle. He's like 360 pounds. You didn't get to draft Jordan Davis. Maybe you would have if he fell to your pick at 17, but you still can get someone that could fill a similar role. He's maybe not going to be Jordan Davis, not the same athlete, because who is? But Siaki Ika out of Baylor is as big as they come in terms of space eaters, and I think the Chargers could definitely use that across the defensive line. Yes, I know you brought in Sebastian Joseph Day, Austin Johnson, drafted a Tito Obanaya, but Siaki Ika could definitely be the best of the bunch. And then rounding things off with some of my favorite players in the draft here coming up, or maybe just one of them. No number 32 pick, of course, voided by the Dolphins, so everyone moves up a spot. I have the Chiefs going Brian Branch out of Alabama. So he's a safety. He's also a nickel corner. He's the star in Alabama's defense. Malachi Moore played that spot as well, who I also think will probably end up being a first-round pick, even though I don't have him included in here because I have another Alabama corner, the boundary, and Eli Ricks, the transfer from LSU. But Brian Branch is a monster. I could see him going a whole lot higher than this, but we just know that the league doesn't really value safeties and nickel corners quite so much. I still think he will be a first-round pick, but somebody that teams think could end up being a slot corner or a safety probably doesn't go that high. And that, look at Trent McDuffie, who the Chiefs took, who I love, by the way. I love Trent McDuffie. I think he can play on the boundary. That's not Brian Branch's game. He's a safety slash nickel, where Trent McDuffie's a boundary slash nickel slash could play safety if you need him to, because he's just that good. But Brian Branch is an absolute stud. Check him out in the Alabama defense this year. You're going to see a lot of opportunities for him. Big game after, every single week. He is so good. And then another player who was awesome for LSU, ended up transferring, of course, to Alabama. Haven't seen him play for the Crimson Tide just yet. The Bucs with Jamel Dean being a free agent, I could see them going with a corner. Eli Ricks is a boundary. You can have Sean Murphy-Bunting in the nickel, Carlton Davis, of course, on the outside. Don't even necessarily have to bring Jamel Dean back. And you can take Eli Ricks, really solid player. And then I have the Bills going with Isaiah Foskey out of Notre Dame. Foskey's really good. I could see him being taken a whole lot higher than this as well. Really good athlete. I think he's more of your typical 3-4 outside linebacker. Very different than a Gregory Rousseau or a Boogie Basham who's already on the roster. He's more of the Von Miller 3-4 outside linebacker build. And Foskey would have big potential in this Buffalo defense with all the big bodies they're getting on the inside. Isaiah Foskey rushing clean off the edge could be a big problem. And that would be a really good fit for the Bills defense, in my opinion. You could also see them taking a corner. Could see them taking even a safety, depending on what happens with Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. They're both getting a little bit older. Probably wouldn't do it. Ideally, you'd also consider a linebacker at this spot, but obviously it's a long ways out. It's August 13th as I record this. So much could change, but that's going to do it for this mock draft, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed. A ton of different players could end up going in the first round, obviously. Comment them down below. I'll check them out. There's actually a really interesting safety I was looking at from Boise State. J.L. Skinner. It's an interesting group. Here's what you need to know, though. 6'4", 220-pound safety that plays over the top at times for Boise State. It's interesting. But that's going to do it for this mock draft. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Take it easy.